so one day my dad she said he almost kind of burst through the door, and he said, I know what to do. And he had been in prayer, and the Lord had spoke to him in prayer, and it was one of those really supernatural type of things where he said, the Lord said to him, you have a friend who's going to introduce you to a man who will introduce you to a man who you will work for.
Hi everyone, welcome to Makeup with a Message Monday, where beauty meets faith, and we have powerful conversations. This is my beautiful guest, Jaime Luce, a friend, sister in Christ, and I'm so happy to have her here. Jaime Luce, author of You Don't Need Money, You Just Need God. We discussed that we're going to be having a conversation about her testimony, as well as sharing biblical values in stewarding our money, and her amazing, and as I mentioned, amazing testimony. And she also has a podcast, so check it out. We'll link it down below, and it's called the Jaime Luce Podcast. So definitely check it out. So let's get started, Jaime. So talk about, as I start with your skin, tell me a little bit about growing up, about your faith and your faith journey.
Okay. Well, I was fortunate to be raised in a Christian home. Both of my parents, their parents, so my grandparents, were both saved. However, my mother's mom, she didn't get saved until she was in her 30s. Her husband was an alcoholic, so my mother was raised in a home where she dealt with an alcoholic father who may or may not have been around. He could be there for, be there for however many months and then be gone for months. Like he would go on drinking binges and whatnot. And so that was hard on them, and Grandma had to sustain the home. And so it was a pull yourself up by your bootstraps and tough it through kind of, start. And because of her need for the Lord, I think the Lord just really used it. She found the Lord at a little church called the Open Bible Church. And that began a journey of a real woman of faith. And she really did pass on quite a legacy. She taught us all truly to pray. We called her the General.
I love that.
Yeah, she was a prayer warrior for sure. She would say, I don't know, I got a burden. She'd all of a sudden feel the need to pray. It could be for a missionary in a country. It's not a missionary she knows. She just knows there's a missionary, or she'd get the name of a country, or some piece of information, and she would pray literally for hours until she felt like she got an answer in prayer, that it had been done and finished, whatever that was. And so we learned to persevere in prayer. You didn't just have one little prayer for a moment. You prayed until the answer came, is what she taught us.
So important, right?
Really important.
So many of us go in and like, God, why is this happening? Why is that happening? It's like, it's a dialogue, it's a conversation. It's waiting also for the Lord to answer.
Yes, absolutely. And some people, of course, feel that they're, I don't know if you would consider that a gift, but she had an intercessory burden on her life, that she interceded for people in circumstances that have nothing to do with her. It's very, that part is a very selfless thing. That was her contribution versus, playing a big role in a church or doing some kind of ministry. Hers was prayer, and it was for all people. So
intercession is also a call, right? It's one of the things that I believe that we're meant to do, we're supposed to do.
Oh, absolutely. If you look at the story of Esther, right now, the Jewish faith, they're all preparing to celebrate Purim, if not already. It's right around this time.
Yes.
Okay, well, the story of Esther is truly the story of intercession. Mordecai hears of the plight that's come against his people, and Esther, bless her heart, she's, unbeknownst to her, flailed into a life that she didn't see coming, being raised by an uncle and then being taken by force to see if the king might take pleasure in her. So, it's quite a story just on what she was dealing with personally. But she did a really interesting thing. When Mordecai made her aware, and she shared her fears that if he does not welcome me, this could be my death,
Right.
and the true sacrifice, she asked everyone to fast with her, that she was going to fast for 3 days. And she was willing to be the one to pay the sacrifice. She asked everyone to pray for her, but that she was willing to be the one to stand in the gap and take the heat, so to speak, whatever would happen. And
Because if you entered the king's presence without being welcomed, it was death.
Yeah, you're dead.
So,
It truly was a scary thing for her, and she knew that Queen Vashti had been expelled. We don't know all that happened there, but she was no longer queen, so that Esther could be.
Right.
So there's definitely some. I'd be afraid for sure. I'm sure any other woman would be too, especially a young girl. When you think about her situation, it's one thing to be brave and to have no choice, but
Right.
going before the king, that was a choice. She was already queen, so now that part was done, and now she had to choose. And how will she sacrifice? What will she do? And she stood up for her people. She interceded for her people. And a king's edict at the time could never be changed once he had signed it. So the edict that had already gone out was that that anyone who wanted to attack the Jews on that particular day would have they could do it without consequence,
Right.
and take whatever they wanted to take. And because of that, his answer to her, which I think is so beautiful when you think about in prayer,
Right.
he said, okay, you write the decree and I'll sign it. And whatever that decree is, that will stand, because nothing that I do, once I do this,
So the
it can't
king
be undone.
So was it the king that told
The king told
Esther
her
this?
at the point, yeah. I mean, of course, I'm leaving out the whole Haman story of that, but
Right.
yes. And he said, you write the decree.
Wow.
And so she was able to then go and write a decree that we could, on that same day, defend ourselves and keep for us anything that we take. And so the whole thing was reversed. It's like a divine reversal. The whole story changed because of her obedience.
And what I love is that she put what God, because Mordecai actually said, if it's not you, God will use somebody else.
That's right.
And you've been here for such a time as this. So I love that, because I can relate it to our lives. And sometimes we're afraid to do something, but it's like, but who are we more wanting to please? Who is
Right.
more important? Lord, you've called me to this. As much as there's so much fear in doing what I feel that I'm called to do,
Right.
you're more important, and you'll make a way, and you'll defend me, and you'll protect me.
Yes, absolutely.
So I love
that.
that.
Yeah, so that's intercession right there.
Intercession. Okay.
Yeah, so that was on my mom's side. My dad's side, my parents were both, his parents were both, they were both saved and in the church. And my grandmother had a beautiful singing voice, which she passed to my dad.
Oh.
And so I just was really blessed to be raised in the church. However, there comes a point in everyone's life when you grow up, and no matter what you were taught, no matter what you were raised with, especially if it's having to do with God, there comes a point when their God, you have to determine, is this your God? Even
Right.
if you believe he's real, is he going to be Lord of your life? Is he going to be in charge of your life? Is he your God? And in my 20s, I was in a pretty difficult circumstance and really crying out to the Lord. I have a vivid memory of sitting on my bed, and literally the bed was covered, the entire top, covered in cried up tissues from the time I had spent with the Lord that night, just reading my Bible and praying. And really my prayers, honestly, were not pretty. They were me being honest and crying out and needing him to show up, show me who he was. And he was so faithful that night. There are things in the Word you can't get anywhere else. They don't touch your soul the way the Bible does. And literally the promises that he gave me that night have been fulfilled. He truly did what he promised me that night. It took time.
How old were you again?
I was in my early 20s.
Early 20s.
Yeah. And one of them was, he said, in a little while, I knew when I read it, it's in a little while, that this wasn't going to happen overnight, that this was going to be a process. And it was a process, but I hung on to that. It was, there's a scripture when we look at the story of Joseph. There's a scripture that David refers to and David writes and says that while Joseph waited for that promise, the word of the Lord tested him. Meaning that he had the promise from the time he was 17.
Right.
But he went through every kind of trouble and traumatic experience waiting for that word to come to pass. But we know, based off of scripture, that he did wait and God did fulfill that promise. But his life went through a testing. Would he believe it? Would he still believe when it didn't look like it was going to happen? Would he still believe when it got tough, And I think that's all of us, that we can be waiting on God. We want him to prove himself to us, and we're waiting on him. And the word is testing us, But that's the faithfulness of God. If you're willing to allow him to be Lord, to teach you and take you through whatever journey that might look like, to get you to the place where that promise does come to pass, the rewards cannot be compared. You just cannot compare those rewards. So
it's so worth it.
Yeah, it's truly learning to live a life. I think it's a surrendered life. I think you and I talked about
Surrender
that.
is key, I believe. But
Yeah.
what was that the moment where you really, was that your turning point, or was there another incident that happened in your life that you remember that was just that pinnacle of, I'm on fire for Jesus and that I'm living for him? Was that?
Well, what's interesting is that was my moment of really connecting with him, right? To say, okay, I know you were my parents, God, and I watched you do things growing up. I know you're real.
Yeah.
But now I'm responsible for my life, and I've already made a mess of it,
As
and
we
it's
all
like,
do.
yeah. And
As we all do.
it's the request we all make, right? We say, Lord, I've made this mess. Will you come clean it up? Will you come fix what I've done? And he does. And that's the beauty of him being such a wonderful father. I had a good father growing up. I had a loving father. So it wasn't a hard stretch for me to know that this God who is our Father is loving. And I know that's hard for some people because they didn't have that.
Yeah.
And so that we always equate God to what we've experienced before. And we tend to limit him to what we've known by our earthly experience. And he's so far above whatever we could ask or imagine and think. He is what we need. And so if we're willing, and at that moment, those were my moments where I was saying, okay, Lord, I need you to come in. I need you to change whatever needs changing. I need your help. I obviously can't do this on my own. And once my husband and I got married, we both had like, okay, this is what we're doing. And we're going after God. And this is, it was like, there's an old book by Tommy Tenney called God Chasers. And it had come out shortly, either before or after we got married. And we went and heard him speak. And it was kind of our little, like marching orders. This is us. We're going to just chase the Lord, We're just going to go after him. There's a scripture that says, if you seek him, you will find him. But there's a caveat.
Seek him with all your heart.
Yes. If you will seek, you will find me. But you have to seek me with all your heart. Mm-hmm. And that's, again, a point of surrender and saying, I'll do it your way. Each of us has a will, and the Lord will work with us while we learn to put that will down, I guess. It's a Jesus moment, right? He's in the Garden of Gethsemane, and he literally says the words, I don't want to do this. Is there another way?
Yeah.
Please, Father, is there another way?
Yeah.
And he knows, and the Father says, this is the way. This is the only way.
But now my will, but yours.
Exactly.
It's like, it's one of those things that we have to, it's hard to surrender.
Right.
Lord, I'm giving all of me to you. I'm surrendering everything to you.
Yes.
And so I know you're going to meet my needs. So,
right.
Because so many people will do that. Will be like, Lord, I'm just going to give you this piece of my heart.
Yeah.
Answer this, but everything else is hidden. I don't worry about that. Let me just like deal with it on my own.
Right. Oh, and it's almost as if, and this is kind of I don't know if this is Western culture, because I think it's worse here. Mm-hmm. We tend to think, okay, God is spiritual, so I'll give him the spiritual part of my life.
Right.
That means if I go to church, or if I pray, or if I read the Bible or listen to a Christian podcast or,
or worship music for that
worship
matter.
music, that's the part I give him, my spiritual part.
Everything else.
And everything else is whatever I do on my own. And we miss so much. There's a scary verse in the Bible. To me, it's the scariest verse.
Where Jesus says,
it's the scariest verse.
I know which one you're talking about.
Yeah, and he says, there will be those on that day. And that day is referring to when eternity, when we are meeting him and we are giving an account, right? We are at the end of our life. We are entering eternity. And he says, there will be those to me on that day who say, Lord, Lord. And he will say, depart from me, you worker of iniquity. I never knew you. And that's hard to swallow. That's one of those things where we think, but Lord, they'll say, I did this in your name. I did that in your name. Like, I went to church and I told my friend that I served you, or I prayed for that person, and he's saying, but I never knew you. Yeah, the know is an intimate relationship. And so to know him, that it's, if you are married and you have your intimate relationship with your spouse, that means they know the plans that day. They're part of the plan. They're part of the future plans. They're part of the decision-making process. You've talked about this. But I can't say that of God if I'm not intimate with him. If it's just my plan, I just do what I want to do.
Whatever I want to do. I don't care what you want.
Yep. It's my life.
My life.
Yeah.
I'll just, come to church once a week and light a candle. As Armenians, we used to just light a candle and wear a cross and think, we're just Christians. But
and it doesn't mean that you don't believe he's real. But I kind of like to challenge people on that, because if you really think that God is real, really, you really believe that he's God, that he created the universe, then what do I do with Scripture then? If I really believe that, wouldn't I want to know, okay, is there stuff I need to know about him? If he's real, if he can control it all, create and do with everything as he chooses, it puts an importance on him when you understand that you really believe in him.
Especially if you know he is the author and finisher of your life.
Yes.
He is the one that will direct what happens. We all know we're going to come to a point where we're going to take our last breath.
Right.
Where are we going?
Right.
That's a pretty serious question. And it's and a lot of people I know, when I was younger, I used to do this. When I get older, I'll take it more seriously when I get older. But sometimes we don't know if we're going to wake up the next day.
We don't know.
You don't know when your life's going to end. So when you have someone pouring into your life and explaining to you at a young age, that's why God says, teach a child the way to go when they're young and they won't depart from it. I feel like it's so important for us to grow up with that knowledge, with that reverent fear of God.
Yes. Well, and the book of Proverbs clearly says over and over and over again, that the fear of the Lord is the beginning of wisdom.
Oh, yeah.
And we tend to think, well, you shouldn't be afraid of God. And I'm thinking, okay, but you should. He loves you. Don't you have a reverent fear of your own earthly father? Yeah. Of course they love you, or they at least should be loving you, right? As a good father, they would love you, but they would also discipline you, but they would protect you, they would take care of your needs, but they would train you and teach you how to grow into a mature adult so that you could go do this on your own, right? So what is he saying? That he is letting us know, I love you. He says very clearly that I'm a good father, so don't get upset when I correct you. What do I do with under my eyes? What do I have the wrinkles. I have a little bit of crepey skin going on underneath there. And do I use concealer or no? Is it,
So yeah, you can definitely use concealer, especially if you have dark circles. If you don't have dark circles, the difference is though, foundation has a different formulation and concealer has a different formulation.
Oh, okay.
Concealer, not only is it has more pigmentation, and it depends on the product, obviously, it depends on the brand. But for the most part, it does have a little bit more pigmentation, so because it needs to cover that darkness, brighten that area. But if you you need to make sure, first of all, it's hydrated under the eyes.
Okay.
Because if it's not hydrated, that foundation or that concealer is gonna kind of grab on and accentuate those fine lines even more.
Okay.
You want to let the moisture like sit and really drink. First of all, drinking a lot of water
Right.
is also very important. Putting your eye cream on, and not only in the morning but at night as well when you go to sleep. So keeping your skin hydrated. Let's even mention the outward stuff, because you can take care of your skin but smoke and drink and do all that stuff and get out in the sun without protecting yourself. So when all those things are taken care of, your concealer should be moisturizing, especially if you're older, like over 50, as I am as well. Make sure it's something that's moisturizing and not too drying, because there are products that are meant for oily skin that could really like accentuate those fine lines because they're a lot heavier.
Okay.
And what I like to do is setting spray a little bit on, whether it's, probably my beauty blender is easier because brush will tend to move it.
Okay.
And just set under the eyes with a little bit of the setting spray, like a hydrating setting spray, so that it also sets it so it's not super dry under the eyes.
Okay.
And you could use if you're older but you still have a little bit of a oily skin, you're not super dry, then using the smallest amount of under eye powder. Again, powder for under the eyes is completely different than a powder for the face. It's more finely milled, so it doesn't, it's not as heavy. Exactly. Yeah. So let's talk back about your walk with God, and what would you give the reader? Is there like a time in your life when something happened that you kind of almost gave up? What that looked like, and how to not give up? How to not let your circumstances kind of hinder your walk with God and what He's doing in your life.
Right.
Because we tend to question Him all the time.
We do. I can honestly say that I've had moments, of course, but because of having such a strong, now I left out my parents, I talked about my grandparents, but my parents are very much, they have lived what they say. So they were not the kind of people who, went to church, but then acted completely differently during the week.
And those are the people that push people away from God, because they're like, if God is like this, then I don't want to know God.
Right.
And it's so unfortunate.
It really is, that we need to truly be honest with who we are. And the Lord's, that's His way. He says, I am the way, the truth, and the life. If we're going to serve Him, we need to be those who boldly have made that decision and that choice. But because my parents did actually live that, and I watched that example, so I had grandparents and parents, I had such a rich library of memories, truly, of the things that they needed God to do, that I watched God come through for them. We write about, so in the book, You Don't Need Money, You Just Need God. I had my mom, her name is Judy Mercer, and I had her write several chapters because really the premise for the book came from me hearing my mother say that phrase all the time.
Wow.
You don't need money, you just need God. And it was her way of reinforcing to herself the truth of the word, because she would get worried about money. She'd be afraid of the circumstance, and there's not enough money, and what am I going to do? And I need this and we need that, and how are we going to pay the bills? There was a time, and this story's in the book, but there was a time when my dad had lost his job. And in that course, she had sat us down. We were probably I maybe was just 13, 14, something like that. And so you've got, my younger sister is only 17 months younger than me, and then I have a younger brother 7 years younger than me. And so you're raising a family, and Dad loses his job, and this is going to be a huge impact on the family. And my mom sat us down just to say, hey kids, I just need you to know this is kind of our circumstance right now. So I don't want you to be embarrassed, but if we go to church and your friends ask if you can go out afterwards, we really can't do that right now. So I'm just letting you know so that you don't, she was preparing us. She didn't want to be embarrassed by the question and have to answer it, and didn't want us to be embarrassed. And, so we just knew, yeah, that sounds great, but we really can't do that today, so.
Right.
And it helped for a while, but what was interesting is, and I'll tell you this, what God did, but it had so settled with me that she had to come back to me a couple years later and be like, Jamie, I'm just wanting to know if everything's okay, because, you haven't asked to go with your friends, and you haven't. And I said, well, Mom, you told us that we couldn't. She kind of laughed. She goes, honey, your dad's had a job for, she just assumed I knew that the circumstance was different now, so that I didn't have to worry about that. But anyway, the story that we tell in the book is really quite remarkable. They were both just devastated. God, we need you to move. My dad was looking for a job, couldn't find a job, and he was the more quiet one in prayer. He'd get up before anybody in the morning and sit in his chair and just internalize, which I tend to do as well, but he would just kind of internalize the suffering of that and be praying quietly, sitting there in the chair. And my mom, she was the one who was more expressive, and so you'd hear her in there crying out to God and saying, Lord, we need your help. We don't know how we're going to pay these bills, or what are we going to do. And there came a day, I think they had gone through a weekend, and it was just kind of, my mom could hold it together all week because she had a job, so she was forced to.
What did your mom do?
She was an executive secretary for vice president of a large company called Hart Hanks at the time. This is years ago, and I don't think this is in publication anymore, but there was a magazine called The Penny Saver.
I remember that.
Yeah, and so she worked for the vice president of that company, and so she had her job, so they weren't destitute, but they were a 2-income family and having only 1 income. So she said she would make it through the week, and because she had to keep it together, she was working and had to get work done and keep her focus on work. But the minute the weekend would come, she'd kind of fall apart because there was nothing to take her focus and keep her mind off of their need, And it's on the weekend when you're wanting to do stuff and you're not able to do the extra stuff and that kind of thing. So one day my dad she said he almost kind of burst through the door, and he said, I know what to do. And he had been in prayer, and the Lord had spoke to him in prayer, and it was one of those really supernatural type of things where he said, the Lord said to him, you have a friend who's going to introduce you to a man who will introduce you to a man who you will work for. I mean, that sounds crazy, right? You're thinking, how did you hear God say that? But he came home and he told that to my mom. And very shortly after that, he gets a phone call from a friend of his who said, hey, Jim, I was just thinking, I know this guy, and maybe I should introduce you to him. And so my dad immediately, of course, is like, the little antennas go up. Is this what the Lord was talking about?
Yeah.
And he introduced himself to that man. And then once that man heard what my dad's skill set was, he said, oh, you don't need to work for me. You need to. And he said, let me introduce you to someone.
Wow.
Yeah. And that
Goosebumps.
man, and what's amazing is that company wasn't actually a company yet. My dad went and met this man, and the man said, I have this old classic car that's just basically a shell.
Right.
And he said, could you restore this car? He goes, yes, I could.
Wow.
Very confidently, he knew he could. And he said, what would you need? And he told him, all the pieces of equipment he would need, the amount of time, the man hours, the kind of things that would be necessary.
Right.
And he said, so if I get all that for you, you can do my car. And he said, yes. And that man ended up creating a business for my dad that day. That started. He hired him, and that turned into a classic car business where they rebuilt cars and showed them in shows. And my dad worked there until he eventually took a job working at a church in the later years of his life. He was there for a couple decades.
Wow.
But that was God's miracle,
So we're going to just take a quick break so I could do your lashes, because I need the focus. We're going to do her lashes. We're going to, just finish that part. We'll be back to hear her testimony. Actually, more than she already shared one testimony, but she has so many more. I can't wait to come back and share her amazing testimony with how just God has changed her life. So we'll be right back. Okay, we're back with her lashes done, and we're going to pick up back on our story. Actually, we were chatting about what you would tell someone who maybe is going through something, was ready to give up. Because that walk it's almost like an everyday.
Right.
What would you say to that? And tell us a little bit of a story of what you maybe went through.
Yeah. There are opportunities, of course, every day to want to give up for one reason or another. And I remember a time, we have 4 children. Our oldest is a son, Matthew. And during his teenage years, often this happens for our children, sadly. But he went through a really rough time of, he knew and believed in the Lord, but he wanted his way. He was young and immature and stubborn and strong. He's very strong. You know, there's a famous book that psychologist James Dobson wrote called The Strong-Willed Child. And
I'll have to read
that's
that.
my precious Matthew. He was the strong-willed child. And it's really difficult when you're dealing with the everyday of relationships, whether that be with children or marriage or work, and bosses and things like that. We go through very difficult times and we're not sure how to respond to them. We get triggered by them, by things that are unresolved in us, and
they get triggered
and
by
then
it.
they get triggered by our response, and it just escalates. And for my son Matthew, he really was angry. He was just really angry. I mean, it started even when he was little, with kindergarten. The assignment was, here are 2 drumsticks, go home, and this should have been fun, right? This should have been a fun thing for us to do beats.
Right.
And we'd end up in tears before we were done. Both of us would be in tears by this, because he did not want to do what he was being told to do.
Oh, Matthew.
And I knew instinctively this child has great strength, but learning how to train up that strength, I really thought, I just don't know that I can do this. I mean, every day was, like I said, I'd end up in tears. It was just a battle. My life was a battle.
And you were that mom that raised him up knowing the Lord. You taught him.
I did, but that's what's so hard, is because you are expecting, like, I went to the pastors, I would listen to different leaders, watch the well-known preachers that people, what are they saying about raising a child?
Right.
And what do I do? And I remember someone giving me, back in the day, in the dinosaurs, we had cassette tapes, right? So I had these cassette tapes given to me on raising your children. And it was someone who was very well known. If I said the name, everybody would know who that person is. And this was back at an earlier part of their ministry, but still very, very well known. And the whole series was on raising kids. And I thought, okay, this will be my answer. I'll figure out what to do by listening to these cassette tapes. Lord, thank you for sending me these cassette tapes. And I listened to them, and I was so upset and frustrated when I was done, because they would say, you need to do such and such, but give you no examples of how to do that. How does that practically look in your day-to-day life?
Right.
And I think this doesn't help me. If you don't tell me what I'm supposed to do when this happens, what do I do? When this, I needed specific, very practical help.
Right.
And it wasn't there. And I remember thinking, God, I will fail with him. The fear of, it's not just my failure, it will be his life. I am responsible for this child's life and eternity. You have given him to me as mom. Now, of course, dad's doing dad's part, right? And I'm doing mom's part, but moms carry the emotional part of their child, right? I mean, that's what we do. And there was a day, he was probably, 15 years old maybe. And he came out of his room, he was furious. And he was the one that, one time he was angry and we hear this loud bang and he punched his fist through a wall. So then I got to repair the wall and go have surgery on his hand.
Oh,
It's
no.
like, yeah, I mean, just pent up anger, right? And him not understanding where the anger's coming from and, and how to deal with it either. And I certainly didn't know how. And it wasn't my personality. I was not a confronter. I was the mild-mannered, run from the confrontation. So this was, what in the world do I do? How do I do it? And so he came out of his bedroom and he was so angry. And he was saying all kinds of things he shouldn't have been saying to me, very disrespectful. And of course, Dad's not home to stop that in the moment. And as soon as he finished and started to walk the other way in the hall, I turned and walked my opposite way. And I said out loud, and I don't know if he heard me or not, but I put my finger up and I said, Satan, you're going to regret that you ever started this with me. And I knew in that moment, faith hit me.
Right.
We're looking for those moments when God confirms to us, I'm still here. I know this is hard. I know you're still in the middle of it, but I haven't left you.
Yeah.
And his promises are forever. They don't change. He said, I'm the same yesterday, today, and forever. Another verse says, I am the Lord thy God, I change not. And so if I've made him my God, truly made him my God, and I'm seeking him, and I'm doing what he's asking me to do, I'm doing the best I know how to live the life that I feel he's called me to.
Right.
And and it's hard. And so many people think, well, I tried that. That didn't work for me. I did that for a while and God didn't answer my prayers. And I have a family member who once said, went through a divorce. It was a very difficult time in her life. And at the time, she was ready to give up. And she said, I tried it. It didn't work for me.
Right.
And she didn't turn her back on the Lord, but she quit for a little while having expectation that he would do something for her. And then God did. I mean, he did, because he's God. He's true to his word. He literally tells us, my word goes forth out of my mouth, and it will accomplish what I set out for it to do. And it cannot return to me void. So it's impossible for that word not to happen. The minute he says it, it has to happen. It's creation, right?
But it's
the Lord
important for us
said,
to come into agreement with that word.
Yes, and to wait on it. He has a perfect timing. Now to us, we think we know what that perfect timing is. Now right now would be perfect, Lord. I need this right now. That would be perfect. But he knows. And I have to get to the point that if he's truly Lord of my life, I have surrendered my timeline.
Right.
I've surrendered my will. I've surrendered what I want. And I say, Lord, not my will, but your will be done. And we went through some years where my son went through his proving ground. And the Lord took him on a journey of true transformation. And I can honestly say that threat I made to the devil came to pass. My son is now a minister.
I love that.
And that is God's faithfulness. He was true to his promise to me.
Amen.
And it doesn't mean there won't be times, but we have to just hold true. What do you believe about God? And so I challenge people, if you don't know him that way, you need to spend more time in his word. You need to get to know him. You need to spend some time saying, Lord, prove yourself to me. I want you to prove yourself to me. I'm open. Just be open to let him prove himself to you. And watch what he'll do. He will do it. He will prove himself.
We know that our battle is against, flesh and blood. That the enemy is truly behind everything. What would you say to a parent who's going through that with their son or daughter, who's kind of rebellious, who's being disrespectful, not honoring their parents?
Well, I can only tell you from my experience what I've done.
Right.
And for me, I always say, Lord, I know that if it's in your word, and if this is something you have said in your word, that you cannot lie. You said you are not a man that you could lie.
Right.
And so because he can't lie, and because I believe that, I believe he's who he says he is, then I go to the word and I get a promise out of the word. And I tenaciously hold on to that word. That's like my war cry. So when things happen that are right in my face, that are denying that word to me, they're saying that word is a lie, that word will never come to pass, that will never happen for you. For me, that fires me up inside.
Yeah.
And in my prayer time, then I go to the Lord and I say, you said, and this is your word, and you can't lie to me. and I'm expecting you to do what you've promised me. I know I may not see it today, but I'm asking you to continue to do the work that I know that you're doing. Give me wisdom on how to talk to my child. Give me opportunity. And if it's not me, then put in their path the people who they will hear and listen. My son, the one I was telling you about, he had a friend, and he was over for dinner one night. And I ended up sharing some. His mother, to me, is like a sister in the Lord, and she is a wonderful mentor to so many women, and powerful woman of God, powerful woman of God. And I was saying something, talking about the Lord. It was a spiritual conversation that I was having with this young man. And he stopped and he said to me, you know, my mom has said that to me before. And he said, and I didn't hear her. But because it came from you, I was able to hear it. And so that helped me to know, you know, that's God's faithfulness to her.
Yeah.
That it doesn't have to come from us.
He'll use someone else.
He'll use somebody else. And he'll appoint those who know exactly how to talk to that person, that young man or young woman, and who will have influence in their life that they want to hear. And it was simply because he would come and we would talk, and there was no agenda, and he knew our walk with the Lord, and it was just the right setting for him to hear something that he needed to hear, you know, and that little incident was just something that gave me hope for whatever was in the future with the kids.
Well, I'm gonna have to spray real quick.
Early on in my faith journey of finances, I literally was at a very low point. I had $30 to my name, and I needed to buy diapers, I needed formula, I needed gas in my car, I had a insurance car payment due, and work was 50 miles away, and I didn't have gas to put in the car just to get to work. And I went to church that Sunday night, and I was really, I went out of obedience, but my heart was so weighed down with what I was facing, and I didn't have an answer. And I was the kind of person, I didn't go and tell anybody that I had a need. I really depended on the Lord. I felt like the decisions I had made in my life up until that point put me in that position. And I felt responsible for that position, and it was nobody else's responsibility to get me out of it. But I did go to the Lord, and as they were getting ready to take the offering that night, I actually owed $30 in tithe, and I only had $30 left with all of these needs.
Wow.
And it was a pivotal moment for me. And I said, I cried. I literally, he's ready to take these, praying over the offering, and I'm sitting there with tears running down my face, and I'm crying, and I'm saying, Lord, this is all I have left. And I could cry right now, but don't want to mess up the makeup. This is all I have left, but it's yours. It's the tithe, so I can't keep it. I don't know what I'm going to do, but this is yours. So I wrote the check, and I put the $30 in the offering. I went home that night thinking, well, I can't get to work tomorrow, and I can't buy the kids stuff, and I didn't know what I was going to do. I went to bed. I kind of cried myself to sleep that night, and I woke up.
Make me want to cry now.
And I woke up in the morning, and like a zombie, I don't know what I was thinking. I honestly, I'm thinking, I don't have gas in the car. I don't know what I even was thinking, like try to drive on fumes and pull over on the side of the road because I ran out of gas. Like, I don't know what I was thinking, but I started getting ready for work. And
The Lord's like, I'm not going to let you remember that.
I just don't know what was going on in my mind. I just think I was in denial, honestly. And started to walk towards the garage where the car was. And at the time, I was living at my parents' home. And I hear my mother's voice. And she says, Jamie, wait a minute. And she was just waking up. She comes down the stairs, and she said, I almost forgot. And she takes my hands, and she said, someone last night told me to give this to you, but they want to remain anonymous. They said the Lord told them to give this to you last night.
Oh.
And it was a check for $100.
Oh my goodness.
And it's just $100, but to me, that bought me the diapers I needed. It put gas in my car, the formula I needed, and just enough to pay my little insurance payment. It literally paid for everything. That's the God I serve. And it was in that moment that I said, I will never not trust you with my finances again. And I will always give to you what belongs to you. You come first. He proved himself to me that day. But I have to do it. It costs us something.
Yeah.
I really, I'm starting to cry. Here comes the tear.
That's okay.
Okay.
But it takes us that obedience for him to meet us there, right?
Right.
When we trust him, we have to take that step. It's like faith without works is dead.
Right.
So,
Right.
you know, you took that step. You showed by your life that, Lord, I'm just going to trust you. I don't know how, but I know, I trust somehow you're going to meet my needs.
Right.
And he does.
Right.
And that's so beautiful. Oh my goodness. That's such a beautiful, beautiful story. I can't wait to get into more of your, of your testimonies. Honestly, Jaime, thank you so much for sharing your wisdom and your experience. Should we see your reaction?
Reveal.
It's very simple.
Okay.
It's not like we didn't do a dramatic look. This is your everyday, normal podcast look. Something soft, something natural.
Okay, here we go. Oh, that's so nice and clean.
It just looks clean.
Yes.
We opened your eyes, so we did really soft, just individual lashes. I did put a little white, not a white, but a flesh toned liner on the inside of your eyes. What that does is, as we age, the inside of rim gets like more red and looks irritated, and it ages us too.
Okay.
If you notice a baby has like white, like inner rims.
Oh, okay.
It's just such a youthful look. So we put a little bit of that. It also opens up your eyes, makes it look bigger.
Okay.
But overall, I just made your brows not too thick. So, but just kind of even them out, very natural looking, nothing too heavy. And your foundation, a little bit of powder. I mean, you look beautiful already, so you don't need much. You don't even need makeup. You just need God.
You just need God. That's right.
I love it. But so if you liked part of her story, you definitely want to don't miss the rest. And we're going to be diving more deeper into scriptures and getting your faith on another level, on trusting God with everything, especially our finances. But with everything, it will increase your faith. So make sure you subscribe if you like what you heard. Subscribe and follow us and share this podcast. And let us know in the comments below what you want to see next time. I mean, what do you want to see? We want to give you the listener, the viewer, what you want to see. So we'll definitely be praying for you as well. If you have any prayer requests, please put them below. We'll definitely be able to pray for you all. Thank you, Jaime.
All right, amen. Thanks for having me.